October 7th is a day that will forever live in infamy. 3,000 Hamas terrorists stormed into Israel. They killed parents in front of their children and children in front of their parents. They dragged 255 people, both living and dead, into the dark dungeons of Gaza.
As the war continues to rage between Israel and Hamas in the Gaza Strip, efforts to reach a diplomatic resolution continue.
Israeli Defense Forces say their troops have stepped up operations in Gaza to bring Israeli and foreign hostages home.
A breakthrough still seems elusive.
My friends, defeating our brutal enemies requires both courage and clarity. Clarity begins by knowing the difference between good and evil. Yet incredibly, many anti-Israel protesters, many choose to stand with evil. They stand with Hamas.
Go colonize somewhere else.
They refuse to make the simple distinction between those who target terrorists and those who target civilians, between the democratic state of Israel and the terrorist thugs of Hamas.
Pro-Palestinian protesters are demanding UCLA divest from any companies with ties to Israel.
Students clashing with police, tents set up on college campuses. Across America, chaos engulfs universities as pro-Palestinian protests spread coast to coast.
Does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Penn's rules or code of conduct? Yes or no?
It is a context-dependent decision, Congresswoman.
That's your testimony today? Calling for the genocide of Jews is depending upon the context?
Get back! Get back! Continued clashes and threats of violence on college campuses coast to coast.
Ugly scenes at UCLA as pro-Palestinian protesters and their opponents engage in violent clashes.
The school has shut down on-campus classes, and Jewish students say they fear for their safety.
Free Palestine!
My name is Shabbos Kestenbaum. I'm a recent graduate at Harvard University. You know, this is my first time back. It almost seems like I'm at a scene of a crime. This was the place where I experienced anti-Semitism in the United States for the very first time in my life. Coming here, it's sort of bittersweet. This is where I called home for 2.5 years, but it certainly doesn't feel like it anymore.
I was so incredibly proud to be a Columbia student before October 7th, and I think that's how the vast majority of the Jewish community there really felt. I am the daughter of 2 Iranian Americans. My parents were both born in Iran and fled religious persecution and authoritarianism there. So I think, you know, being raised by parents who were persecuted because of their Judaism, who have a great appreciation for the country that we now live in and also for their Jewish identities has really shaped who I am and why I speak out so much about this issue. But also it frankly just feels like we don't have a choice.
My mother is from Latvia and my father's from Belarus. My grandmother is a Holocaust survivor and so is my grandfather from my mom's side, right? They don't mess around. They've seen it with their own eyes. I come from a long line of strong Jews without trembling knees. There's a lot of fear in Jewish students, and that's why I did what I did, to show the Jewish students that there's no need to be afraid of these monsters.
Never again must never be an empty promise. It must always remain a sacred vow, and after October 7th, never again is now.
Frankly, I think it's important that people start to align themselves with Palestinian resistance.
We are calling for complete divestment by Colombia from any company complicit in Israeli apartheid and colonization in Palestine.
Israel is notorious for creating propaganda that sides their one-sided massacre against Palestinians.
I think at this point, it is undeniable that anti-Semitism is real, it is pervasive, and it is systemic across Harvard University.
So right behind me was the site of an installation that my classmates put up with quotes from the PFLP, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, which is a US designated terrorist group. And what I found really remarkable about that installation, besides the fact that it had quotes from a terrorist organization, besides the fact that it called for the boycott of the world's only Jewish state, besides the fact that it called for violence against Jewish people, we Jewish students are not allowed to have our menorahs on campus overnight for the fear it will be vandalized. But this installation, which traveled all over the university, and it actually had Harvard police protect it 24/7. So when we talk about double standards, right behind me is a great embodiment of how Jews are treated qualitatively differently than other minority groups here on campus.
I took classes that challenged me to go beyond my intellectual limits. I took classes that spoke about settler colonialism, apartheid, ethnic cleansing in the context of Israel-Palestine. Not because I agreed, but because I thought in an institution of higher learning, that's what we need to do. But we were taught as fact, not as political conjecture, as fact, that Jews have internalized the ways of Nazi Germany. That the Holocaust is analogous to the experience of Palestinians under the Israeli occupying forces.
Right where we are now was the site where 10, 12 days after October 7th, about 100, 200 Harvard Divinity School students and faculty members gathered for a protest, and the protest called for the divestment from the Zionist entity. It called for the freeing of Palestine from the river to the sea. It talked about globalizing the Intifada. So being a Jewish student, living 50 feet away, taking classes in these buildings, seeing your classmates, seeing your friends so shortly after October 7th, not condemning Hamas, not standing with Jewish students, but actually standing for the cause of the oppressors, was really daunting. And that was my first real experience at Harvard Divinity School and at Harvard University, broadly speaking, of Jewish lives don't seem to matter as much.
One night during the encampment, things got incredibly heated on campus. There were masked mobs chanting to bomb Tel Aviv and telling Jewish students to go back to Europe, to go back to Poland. And it actually got so bad that the group of Jewish students that were on campus that night were practically forced off campus and chased off by this mob that was screaming at them to go back to Poland, telling them that they were all inbred and have no culture. And as these students exited campus, they were met with more masked protesters, this time screaming at them that they vowed to repeat October 7th, not one more time, not 10 more times, but thousands of more times. And this sort of behavior went on for weeks, unchecked, while Columbia did absolutely nothing, until students occupied Hamilton Hall. Columbia, after about a day, was forced to finally take action and remove them. But at that point, the damage had already been done. I think a lot of people will say that that was an isolated incident, that the events of that night, or even of the several weeks that the encampment took place altogether, were isolated incidents, but that sort of festival of anti-Semitism doesn't just happen overnight. That's the direct result of decades of unchecked anti-Semitism brewing at universities like Columbia, and administrators not wanting to even acknowledge the problem. I was in a meeting with Columbia's new president, and she actually admitted that Columbia has a terrorism support problem. We asked her point blank, why do you think this is the case? And she responded that she didn't know, but she knew it was an issue. And when she inherited the role of president, interim president, just this summer, she didn't really realize what she was getting into in regards to this support for terrorism.
It's just Jew hatred. And that's why they choose to do what they do. They go out and they protest and they harass. I mean, our own rabbi at UCLA, Rabbi David Gorevich of UCLA Chabad, was physically assaulted by one of these masked up, hoodlums.
They beat their spouse until they're tired. That's how they sleep at night. They beat their spouse and
You want to talk about something?
Record. Make sure you record really good.
Tell me how much you love America, maybe. Come on.
Pedophile rabbi.
I'm gonna make that phone disappear.
Sure. Back off. Back off.
I'm not touching you, so don't
Yeah,
put your hands
you're
up.
assaulting me. You're threatening me.
How the I threatening you?
You know what assault means? Assault means you're threatening me. You're threatening me. And you're live right now. So you better watch it. Back off. Back off. Back off. Back off. Don't put your hands on him. Back off. Back off. Why don't you show your face, brave man? Huh? He's so brave. Why are you covering your face?
This is why we talk about the Harvards and the Columbias and the MITs incessantly, because unfortunately, what happens at the Harvard and Columbia and MITs has profound implications, not just for Jewish people, but for the American people. These are the future lawyers and doctors. These are the future policymakers and judges. These are the future thought leaders and authors that your children will be reading. And if it is that upper echelon of society, if it is the most progressive, the most elite, the most empathetic, sensitive, and intelligent, who are the same ones calling for an intifada and the freeing of Palestine from the river to the sea, then it becomes a much deeper issue.
Behind me is really the heart and soul of Harvard University. This is Widener Library. This is one of the largest university libraries in the world. This is really, when you think of Harvard, when you think of its academic rigor, when you think of its intellectual discourse, you really think of Widener Library, which makes it all the more confounding, all the more difficult that this was the site of more than 1,000 students and professors shortly after October 7th. They gathered right here. Saying Harvard invests in genocide and in baby killing, a student speaker gets up and says that they're not going to condemn the resistance, and who are we to tell the Palestinian people how they can or can't resist.
We refuse genocide and ethnic cleansing. This should be universal truth. We're here today because Palestinians deserve recognition of the full spectrum of their humanity.
They actually took over the library multiple times, mostly donned with keffiyehs, with masks, again, to shield themselves from accountability. And when you really want to find something that embodies how low the Ivy Leagues and institutions of higher learning in the United States have fallen, you really think of Widener Library. I mean, this is a sacred spot on campus. This is a sacred institution, and to see it being infested with this political indoctrination, to see it being infested with blatant anti-Israel, anti-Jewish sentiments, especially so shortly after October 7th, was really, really difficult. And if you can imagine, this whole space was filled with more than 1,000 students and professors just a week after October 7th. So it really began here. This was the epicenter for many, many months.
My name is Shabbos Kestenbaum. I am a proud first-generation American. I am a proud Orthodox Jew. And as of 5 months ago, I am the proud plaintiff suing Harvard University for its failure to combat anti-Semitism.
When I talk about anti-Semitism at Harvard, I actually go back about 100 years ago, because the president of the university was a man by the name of Abbott Lowell. President Lowell was a Nazi sympathizer, he was an anti-Semite, and he instituted quotas on how many Jews would be permitted to the university. And to me, what's most shocking about the quotas is its relevance in the 21st century, because there were actually more Jews at Harvard University as a percentage under the quota system than there are today. It's not because Jews got dumber over time, it's because there has been a deliberate campaign to crack down on the amount of Jews at the university.
Hearing my professor and my peers justify the rape of women, the kidnapping and slaughter of children, the murder of the elderly, of Holocaust survivors, because of this binary, overly simplistic framework that intrinsically, or inherently, I should say, demonizes Jews on the basis of identity, was when it began to hit me that this is something that over the course of dozens of years had been slowly normalized. And what scares me even more is that so many people at my university and beyond are still not aware of how harmful that worldview is.
The reality is and was, there was a significant amount of students and professors who viewed in positive ways the boycott, divestment, sanction movement at Harvard University. There was a systemic campaign to silence pro-Israel, pro-Jewish voices, both within the classroom and on campus. There were swastikas being drawn in the undergraduate houses. These were things that were happening for years and years.
This support for terrorism isn't new, but October 7th brought it to the surface. at Columbia and at universities across the country.
We were friends with certain people on October 6th, and October 8th, all of a sudden we were the enemy. And I think on campus especially, we always knew that there were things bubbling kind of under the surface.
I was blindsided. I did not expect it to accelerate at that rate.
All of a sudden, our children that were on campus found that they could not get to class without being screamed at, without being tormented, and without being bullied.
It affects the ability to learn. It affects our greatest assets, which are our centers of education. And it starts picking winners and losers of who gets the right to an education, who doesn't.
Especially on a campus that prizes liberalism, inclusivity, tolerance, diversity, to then have what felt like a majority of the student body turning their backs on Jews because we were attacked.
On the night of October 7th, as my friends and classmates saw the images of women bleeding from their private areas, saw the images of babies crying as they were being hoarded onto motorcycles taken into Gaza, saw the images of burnt, charred bodies, they jumped out of bed, some still in their pajamas, to draft what they called an emergency statement to blame Jews for the largest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. A statement written by more than 34 student groups representing more than 1,000 students opens by saying we hold the Israeli regime entirely responsible for all unfolding violence in the Middle East.
Now, just as malicious lies were leveled for centuries at the Jewish people, malicious lies are now being leveled at the Jewish state.
It gave a permission slip, literally, to people that hate Jews to come out and just say the most hurtful, terrible things.
You could almost feel the intensity of the culture war that was about to erupt on campus.
After October 7th, it took less than a week until SJP launched their first rally to globalize the Intifada, and from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. And as we know, that is calling for the direct extermination of Jews living from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea.
There was a letter that came out from SJP expressing solidarity with the resistance on October 8th, 2023. And if that isn't interpreted as sheer support for Hamas's massacre on October 7th, I don't know what is.
Whether it was the physical assault against a Jewish student at Harvard Business School, whether it was the staff member who defaced all of our hostage posters, taunted me with a machete, asked me to debate him as to whether Jews were behind 9/11, whether it was the Jewish student wearing a kippah who was spat on, whether it was the Israeli student being asked by her professor to leave the class because her nationality made others uncomfortable.
I do think that the Columbia administration is becoming increasingly aware that there is broad support for terrorism among the student body and more pressingly among the faculty. But I am just astounded that it's taken them over a year to slowly reach this conclusion when these groups were celebrating a massacre on October 8th.
They're working overtime to try to cover this up. You saw an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal. And my question, though, is they hired so many PR consultants to help the university presidents. How many people have they hired on campus to combat anti-Semitism? The answer is zero. Zero.
We're heading to a point where Jewish students will not be able to attend university on campus. This happened in the 30s in Germany when the Jews were thrown off a campus, and we're heading in that direction. So unless something dramatic happens, our students are going to no longer be welcome on campuses in the United States of America. And then, frankly, I believe the whole system will start to collapse.
Over here is one of the South Lawns, and this is where a lot of the action took place last year. These were hundreds of students and faculty members at Columbia that were part of this really, frankly, just anti-Semitic festival that was allowed to take place and continue on for weeks into finals, so much so that the end of the semester was put onto Zoom. Finals were either put online, postponed, or canceled altogether because the university cowered to the mob. And mind you, this is a mob that would not let Jews and Israelis enter past the perimeter of the gates unless we denounced our Zionism.
Unholy alliance of ideological adversaries. So you have on the one hand far left LGBTQ plus student activists, and then you have right-wing radical Islamic fundamentalists, and they find common ground when it comes to their unity against the Jewish state and against Jewish values and the Jewish people.
When, of course, we see the ultra-right side, the typical Jews will not replace us. You know, that is there, that's there to stay. We had literal Nazis walking down the street. The left is to me, the more insidious type of anti-Semitism and Jew hatred because it's cloaked in the veil of social justice.
One of the most common sayings of the Free Palestine movement today has become, none of us are free until all of us are free. And I have to give them credit because they have been incredibly skillful in building allies and in building coalitions on this warped notion that Jews and Israelis are oppressing Palestinians. Students who know nothing about this conflict, like students in the Barnard Gardening Club, who have been taught to stand with the oppressed despite everything, are so quick to then jump onto this bandwagon, onto this Free Palestine movement without knowing anything of what it stands for, simply because of this narrative and binary that they've been taught.
What we see on a lot of times on college campus is this type of anti-Semitism. The freedom fighters, so to speak, waving, river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Many of these individuals don't even know what they're saying or what river they're talking about, what sea they're talking about, but they believe that out of their, their morality or, their goodness of their heart, they're fighting this fight that is the right fight, even though it's not.
What does from the river to the sea mean? It means that Palestine should be autonomous. What river? Okay. The expression is not anything bad. No, there's an actual river and an actual sea. Yeah, I'm aware of this. No, but what river, what sea? The river that literally is beside Israel and the Palestinian territories.
And what would you say is the main goal with tonight's protest?
I think the goal is just showing our support for Palestine and demanding that NYU stops. I honestly don't know all of what NYU's doing.
Is there something that NYU's doing?
I really don't know. I'm pretty sure they're... Do you know what NYU's doing? About what? About Israel. Why are we protesting here?
Palestine will be free!
I wish I was more educated. I'm not either.
What is your solution?
Bomb Israel!
Many times they're left-leaning ideologically, they're left-leaning politically, and they would not agree with 9 out of 10 things that someone else on the right side believes in and fights for in life, but they do agree on that.
I'm marching today because the siege on Gaza is killing thousands of children right now, and our own government here in Canada is complicit in funding the Israeli genocide.
Our liberation as queer and trans people is bound up in the liberation of Palestinians, and it's not metaphorical. It's our government that has been calling to outlaw protests. It's our universities that are threatened to sanction unions that are support of Palestine.
A big part of the Israeli propaganda machine is pinkwashing, so claiming that Israel is some kind of safe haven in the so-called Middle East for queer people.
I often hear those kinds of statements that, oh, well, if you were in Gaza right now, you would be killed and all of this, but I would counter that with just because someone doesn't understand the lived experiences that I live, it doesn't mean that I am for their genocide.
They're not all necessarily Arabs. I would even say majority of them are not Arabs. It really depends on what situations. There have been times when I've gone to protests where I have been surrounded by purely Arabs that are yelling at me in Arabic and calling me a Jewish dog in Arabic, which I know because my friends speak Arabic and translate it for me. It's not complicated. And there's also situations when, there are no Arabs nearby and it's every single other ethnicity. And to that I ask myself, what are you protesting then? You have no connection to the land of Israel. You clearly don't understand your facts. Why are you filled with so much anger, right? There is no justification for their anger.
There was no killing of children. It was a lie, a lie, a lie.
Hamas attacked women and children.
That is what Israeli sources say, a lot of which...
That's what's been documented. Yeah. Does Israel have a right to defend itself?
No one has a right to kill 30,000 people.
The people that funded the Holocaust is the same people that are doing the same thing to the Palestinian people.
You deny, you say it's no evidence for this stuff.
That didn't really happen. There was not verified.
It's impossible for Hamas to cause that much damage.
Women did not get raped.
No. I've not seen any proof of that. If it did happen, I haven't seen it.
It's reasonable to say that the IDF caused all the damage, most of the damage in that concert.
We're finding out very quickly who our allies are and who our allies are not. I have lost so many friends I would have considered best friends.
And it was actually here when I saw two of my good friends from my theater class who I thought were, supportive of me. I mean, we've been friends for almost a year. And I saw them in the crowd with masks on. I remember I yelled their names into the crowd, like asking them, like, why. It was a stab in the heart, like it was a stab in the back. My own friends, protesting against my existence. So.
Friends of mine that I would spend time with on a regular basis, some of them literally stopped speaking to me with no explanation. Others were, it sounds silly to say, like, gracious enough to allow me a conversation, because what it really was them giving me an opportunity to defend my identity before deciding that I wasn't worthy of their friendship anymore. That's how it felt. None of them even asked me my opinions on the war. None of them asked me my opinions on the conflict or the peace process or the Israeli government. They came to conclusions because of my Zionism and because of my Judaism. And those conclusions were that I wasn't worthy of being their friend anymore.
What I think has been the most horrendous outcome of all this anti-Semitism is the faculty.
About 100 USC faculty members marched through campus tonight to show their support for student protesters.
I am outraged by any decision that endangers these students while they are acting out as the kind of citizens we've asked them to become.
In this country, we're supposed to be able to do that, peacefully protest. So I'm not sure why you call the police on that.
We spoke with one of the organizers of the pro-Palestinian student-led group Divest from Death. He did not want to share his name or uncover his face, but told us seeing faculty members speak up to support the students is heartwarming.
We're writing history. We're making history as of this moment. And we're fighting for Palestinian liberation.
These faculty members have classrooms full of students that have baseline knowledge in these topics. They're being taught to ideologically hate Israel and hate Zionism, which means hate Jews, because of what they're being taught in class by these professors.
Really, if you walk into a classroom, you should feel safe. You're sitting here ready to learn from someone who has incredible life experiences that can really give over to you their wisdom. And now you're feeling if that person is supposed to educate me, hates my nation, my religion, my people, how can I learn from a person like that? And I think what's been most disappointing has been the reaction, the sickening reaction by faculty across America.
Many times these faculty members are the ones at the top of this pyramid of hate, and what they're spewing to their kids and how they're just flipping the format. And truly, when I say indoctrination at its finest, or I should say at its worst, is occurring on these college campuses.
Actually, on October 8th, one of the tenured professors in the Middle East Studies department wrote an op-ed calling the October 7th massacres awesome and incredible, and that they made him feel jubilant.
The faculty members are institutionalized. The faculty members are there to stay for the most part. And that's what's extremely frightening. And the damage that this could do, yes, the college students are coming and going, but they're coming without the hatred in their hearts. They're leaving with hatred in their hearts.
What pains me so much still a year later is that worldview in Columbia's Middle East Studies department and among Columbia faculty more broadly is sort of a norm, more so than an exception.
There's lots of people who have, they make it claim like there is no agenda except education. I think something doesn't add up here, and I'm trying to get to the bottom of where there's certain centers at Rutgers, like what's unclear to me where the money's coming from, and they've not been very transparent about it. Asserting things that are so offensive, including right after the 7th about how awesome, as we've seen in universities, people at universities say how awesome the 7th was.
Hamas has punctured the illusion of invincibility. It was exhilarating, it was energizing. And if they weren't exhilarated by this challenge to the monopoly of violence, by this shifting of the balance of power, then they would not be human.
I encountered teachers, a history teacher of mine who was incredibly anti-Israel, to the point where when I spoke out against him, this was during online learning, he muted me because it was Zoom and he could do that. I literally got physically silenced. My response was very simple. I hung up an Israeli flag behind me because we had to keep our cameras on.
All of these cohorts of students are being indoctrinated, are being brainwashed to then take their views on the streets, take their views at some of these finest universities. Student government kids are just being taught to hate so much, they're moving on to be the government of our United States. This is a huge problem stemming in part from these culprits in faculty, in large part.
The encampment is also an extraordinary place of learning, right? The law students are learning about civil rights. The medical students are learning what does it mean to set up a medic tent and provide street medic services. The students are in there learning about Palestinian history. They're learning about Israeli history. They're learning about Middle Eastern history. They're teaching language classes. They're doing religious services. So I think it's also important to acknowledge student protest as a space of learning.
I'm scared to even walk to class. I'm scared to walk to my car. Yesterday I was here for the rally. I had to walk to my car with 7 different guys, and people came up to my car.
I'm Eli, nice to meet you.
He doesn't shake hands with people like you, bro.
He doesn't shake hands with people like me. What do you mean, like Jews?
No, Zionists.
Zionists. Okay, well 97% of Jews are Zionists. What do you say to that?
3% also won't shake their hands.
You also won't shake the hands of the other 3%.
Yeah.
So you're not shaking hands with any Jews?
No.
One of the big sentiments that we hear is that this is not about the Jews. This is just about Israel. This is about Israel's policies with the Palestinians, that really this has nothing to do with anti-Semitism. And when I hear chants on college campuses against Zionism, that's saying Zionism is racism, that Zionists are not allowed to be on campus, that Zionists are seen to be so evil, that really is anti-Semitism.
These people cannot care about politics, right? They're using Israel as a scapegoat, right? They're using Israel, they say the word Zionist because it's easier for them to say Zionist, because if they're saying Jew, then it's very easy to call them out for what they are. But by saying Israel, oh, well, they just hate us because of our political opinions, right?
The connection the Jewish people have to this place called Zion, the place called Israel, goes back to the beginning of Judaism. It is a core belief and desire that every Jew has to go back to the land of Israel. We've prayed for it for thousands of years. When two Jews get married under the wedding canopy, they break the glass because they're remembering the fact that they're missing something, that they want to go back to the land of Israel. On Passover, we say L'Shana Haba b'Yushalayim, next year in Jerusalem. There's this yearning that Jews have had for millennia to want to go back to the land of Israel. That's Zionism. Zionism is the belief that the Jewish people are intrinsically connected to this land of Israel, and that no matter where we are, this is the place that we want to go back to.
I never described myself as a Zionist because I didn't think the term was particularly relevant to me, simply because Judaism is an inherent attachment to the land of Israel. Judaism is the obligations to live in the land of Israel once you're able to. So having the political addendum of Zionist, I just never felt it was relevant or helpful. And for the first time, I was being described as such, as a pejorative, as something that is bad or something to be ashamed of. And if defending the Jewish people, if defending the only progressive state, the only democracy in the Middle East, if that makes me a Zionist, then sure, I'm happy to call myself a Zionist.
Zionism is the belief that Jews have a homeland called Israel that was established 3,500 years ago. And our history has been full of anti-Semitism, filled with hate. And it was time for us to come home, to be in a place where we have been for thousands of years, and we can protect ourselves. Zionism is living in Israel in peace with our neighbors, being free to worship and be who we are.
Anti-Zionism has been cloaked in sort of social justice. So somebody that calls themselves an anti-Zionist but not a Jew hater, they'll use the same buzzwords about Zionism that are false, but buzzwords such as colonial project or buzzwords such as occupation, when in reality Zionism is merely the right for Jews to have their ancestral homeland and, be their own self-determination in their ancestral homeland. Anti-Zionism, taking away that right and trying to withhold that right, is absolutely anti-Semitism. It's just as clear, black and white. And frankly, questioning the existence of Israel, what other country's existence is even questioned? So it's clearly anti-Semitic, and unfortunately it's just been the narrative has been flipped for the world at large to think that there is a differentiation, but there absolutely isn't.
because of the fact that there are a handful of Jews on my campus and other campuses alike that denounce their Zionism, they then are used as a front by the Free Palestine movement in justifying all of the terribly anti-Semitic rhetoric and actions because of those Jews sort of providing shelter on the basis of their anti-Zionism.
The fact that there are Jews that are overtly and loudly anti-Zionist and anti-Israel, many people think that that could lead the public and the world at large to believe that anti-Zionism, in fact, is not equated with anti-Semitism.
How can you say that you're Jewish? How can you shame your own people?
We're all Jews here.
He was against Judaism.
Jewish too. We're all Jews here. Right?
Yeah, so how are they saying that?
Because they believe in God.
Jewish, I'm standing it.
I don't want
That's our country.
And the Talmud says it's not our country.
That is our country. How dare you say that about our own people?
They don't represent our community. They're that small 3% of Jews that don't represent our community at all.
Jewish or non-Jewish, if you are anti-Zionist, you're anti-Semitic. And that's full stop.
It is the longest and oldest hatred in the world, right? Jew hatred goes back more than 3,000 years.
Since the beginning of the Jewish people's existence, anti-Semitism has been around. From being slaves in Egypt to the story of Haman and Purim to, of course, the onset of Christianity through the Middle Ages, the Spanish Inquisition, obviously leading to the Holocaust. In almost every generation, Jews have been persecuted and discriminated against.
We've seen patterns within, throughout history. When times are rough, point to the Jews. When times are good, it's the Jews that are making times not good. You name it, and we are just, sort of honed in on as the scapegoat, honed in on as the people to be picked on, honed in on as those with power that are smothering those without.
I think over the last number of decades, it's been, a golden era in America where anti-Semitism was thought to be something of the past, of our history. But we know in Judaism, we say it every year on Passover, that b'chol dor v'dor, in every generation, they rise up because they hate the Jewish people, they rise up to want to destroy us. And that's sadly and unfortunately, but it's the reality of what it means to be a Jew. It's been part of our Jewish history. So while, yes, we were shocked after October 7th, when you really take a step back and look at Jewish history, we shouldn't be surprised. Anti-Semitism has been part and parcel of our people. And it's just today, post-October 7th, is just another flare-up. It's another example of what the Jewish people have always dealt with.
To me, this supernatural element of anti-Semitism really underscores one thing, and that's, the validity and the power of the Torah. The Torah says 3,000 years ago, you will be a dispersed, small, despised people. And you see otherwise intelligent, rational actors, those who are at the upper echelons of our society, university presidents, sophisticated professors, who otherwise are intelligent and rational, saying the most horrific, violent, anti-Semitic hate that I have ever heard in my life.
The Talmud asked the question, why was the Torah given on a mountain called Sinai? And the Talmud gives an answer that there's another word in Hebrew. It's spelled differently, but sounds very similar to Sinai. The word Sina, the word hatred. What does it mean? What happened on Mount Sinai? The Jewish people were made messengers to bring values and morals to the world. But the Talmud tells us that those values and morals also bring Sina. They bring hatred. Why? Because there's a rebellion against those values, right? Not everyone wants to live up to the level of those morals and values. And so there's a rejection against it. Now, no one can wake up in the morning and say, I think today I'm going to be immoral. Today I'm going to hurt people. So the rejection is against the messenger of the Jewish people, by saying, look, those Jews are not living up to their values and morals, or look how corrupt, or look how immoral those Jews are. It takes down the message as well. It takes down the message of the values and the morals, and that's really what Judaism says is the core of anti-Semitism.
People don't quite know how to categorize Jews because we don't quite fit into any of the boxes that have been prescribed to us. And so when you have folks that want to stand on the side of the oppressed, want to stand up for justice and against injustice wherever they see it, And then they're taught in tandem, they're conditioned into believing this false narrative about Jews through this binary. It frankly makes perfect sense to me that you would have so many students and young people that are so vehemently anti-Israel.
These people's ideologies today, the social justice warriors, while they mean well, the truth is they've created a new religion, a new set of morals and values, that the fact that it can lead to supporting terrorists shows how corrupted it is. And again, the moral system that stands up against them, the moral system that they're rejecting, is the morality of Judaism, is the values, the timeless values and morals that Judaism has brought into the world that says, no, you have to know the difference between good and evil. You have to know the difference between those that are standing up for innocent people and those that are targeting innocent people. And Judaism has stood for that for millennia. And so these people who, again, mean well, they also have their target against the Jews because the Jews are the moral system that is standing in their way. The answer is that we have to stand up more for those values and morals. If the anti-Semites are saying, we hate you because of the values and morals that you have brought into the world and you stand for, then the best way to fight anti-Semitism is to embrace those values and morals, to learn more about them, to understand why the anti-Semites are so threatened by them, and to spread them more within ourselves, our families, our communities, and the world.
I don't care. You are not the police. You cannot tell a Jew in 2024 where he can go. Why are you telling me to back off? These are thugs who are telling Jews where they can or can't walk. No, we can't. We could do it in the middle over there. This is the state of being Jewish in America. I need police protection to exercise my First Amendment rights. Really brave of you guys.
After October 7th, I bought a one-way ticket to Israel, and I spent 3 weeks digging graves for soldiers killed in Gaza. I spent 3 weeks delivering supplies to army bases. I spent 3 weeks playing guitar and singing for injured civilians. And I did that, yes, because I wanted to get out of Harvard, but also because that's my people. I remember being in a bomb shelter on the night where we allegedly blew up that hospital, which of course we didn't. And I remember seeing the text from my fellow classmates saying that here are the genocidal Zionists who are killing innocent babies. And what really hit me was the saying from the Ethics of Our Fathers, the 2nd century rabbinic text, which is "B'makom she'ein nashim yishtadel lios ish." When there is a place where there are no people, strive to be a man. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to do it, but I knew I had to do something. So to me, it was not that I deliberately decided to speak out. It was more of, this is a culmination of the values that I grew up with.
The way that I cope with feelings of distress is through action. And so after October 7th, I just sprang into action.
We are ostracized, mocked, harassed, assaulted, and scapegoated because of our identities. Online, Columbia students suggested labeling local shops that support Israel's right to exist, quote, with a Star of David. Is this 1938 or 2024? We have been attacked with sticks outside of our library. We have been surrounded by angry mobs, and we have been threatened to, quote, keep running. How many more times must it be proven that unreprimanded, violent rhetoric can lead to physical violence? I am mocked as I walk through my campus and mocked on social media. I have a message for anyone who would seek to silence us. We are not Jews with trembling knees. We are proud Jews who carry with us the tradition of resilience in the face of persecution, and we will not be silenced.
This was the first time I made a big, public appearance at UCLA. Let's just say I, by myself, took out an Israel flag and stood. This would have been maybe October 11th, October 12th. Stood by myself until a gentleman named Guy Guinness on the volleyball team came and joined me. And we two stood together, not to piss off the pro-Hamas protesters, but to show other Jewish students that there is no need to be afraid of these people and that we're always going to stand strong.
We're going this way. You guys have closed the entrance. We are UCLA students. I have my ID right here. I'm being blocked off, not by the security guard, but by you two. You three. Oh, look, they're making their burger while I'm going this way. Excuse me. This is what they do. Everybody, look at this. Look at this. I'm a UCLA student. I deserve to go here. We pay tuition. This is our school. And they're not letting me walk in. My class is over there. I want to use that entrance. Well, I can't take it. Will you let me go in? This could be over in a second. Just let me and my friends go in to class.
not engaging in that.
Then you can move. Will you move?
We're not engaging in that.
Okay, we're going. We're going. I'm going in. I have my hands up. I'm not hurting them. I'm not hurting them. That's what they do. That's what they do, everybody. You guys are promoting aggression. You guys are promoting hate. This is a professor here at UCLA University.
Yes, I am, and I'm talking about the truth. It's a genocide.
What's your name?
What's your problem?
You clearly don't know what the definition of a genocide is.
I don't know.
Hey, ladies and gentlemen, this is a professor.
I don't know what the
at
definition of a
UCLA.
genocide is.
She doesn't know the definition of a genocide.
There is no one way. For example, there's the legal route, lawsuits. It needs to happen. It absolutely needs to happen. Sending emails and letters to school administration, literally bombarding them with emails, needs to happen.
You're doing a great job.
Shabbos, we need 10 million more like you. Let me tell you something right now. You're going after Harvard, man, that's beautiful. I wish I could help you.
Amen, brother.
Congratulations.
I appreciate it.
Harvard will only change if they are forced to change. And the best proof of that is if they wanted to change, guess what? They would have done it already. They would not have waited for a lawsuit, 2 different congressional investigations, $1 billion in donations withheld, a national reputation that plummets, being on the cold open of Saturday Night Live. So yes, the donations do matter. Harvard will listen to the money. Harvard ultimately, and MIT and Penn and Columbia are included in this as well. They need to make money to survive. And if they don't have that money anymore, if their financial situation is constrained, they will change. So if you donate to those universities, if you're planning on sending your kids there, don't do it. And write publicly, say to them publicly why you're not doing it. Yeah, Jews should go to the Harvards and the Ivy Leagues, but not until they have clearly articulated what they're going to do to keep us safe.
I went to University of Pennsylvania as an undergraduate, was there from 86 to 1990. And after I went, I got a PhD from Stanford, went out into the workforce, started making a good living, and eventually got approached by Penn to become a donor and also to join the Board of Overseers. After a week of being shell-shocked and digesting what was going on, that was when I came out with my statement. I wrote an open letter to the president of Penn, telling her and the community that I was no longer giving any money to Penn. I was going to not fulfill my pledge, the pledge that I had outstanding, which was, I think I had $3.5 million left on a $5 million pledge to the university. I was not going to fulfill it, and I would not give another dollar to the university. But I went further to say that I didn't really want to hear back from them. I didn't want to talk to them. There was really nothing to say. Having heard the public statements that Liz McGill had made, the president of Penn, she made a series of statements, each one kind of worse than the previous one, only because the subsequent ones were supposed to correct the flaws in the previous ones, and each one failed to hit the mark even more so. I realized that this wasn't a situation where they made a mistake or that they regretted their actions. It was really trying to put lipstick on a pig. That they were trying to make their egregious anti-Semitic behaviors acceptable to the Jewish community. And I realized that it wasn't something that they could correct. It was a systemic problem that thank God we were made aware of it.
We're suing Harvard not because we want to, we're suing Harvard because we have to. Harvard has violated its federal obligations under law. They are in gross violation of Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. They have normalized, celebrated, and accepted a culture of anti-Semitism on their campus. We are the first case in American history pertaining to the civil rights violations of Jewish students on a college campus that's actually going to trial. They have either been dismissed outright or settled. We are taking this all the way to a judge. The judge, in his own words, has said that the facts as pled show that Harvard failed its Jewish students. We have our own president under oath on live TV in front of Congress say that you actually could call for the genocide of Jewish people depending on the right context.
At Harvard, does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Harvard's rules of bullying and harassment, yes or no?
It depends on the context.
It does not depend on the context. The answer is yes, and this is why you should resign. These are unacceptable answers across the board.
We will prove those facts. We will prove that the environment for Jews at Harvard has been dangerous and unsafe as a direct result of Harvard's behavior. What we hope to accomplish ranges from the practical tuition reimbursements and a cultural and curriculum overhaul, all the way to the more global, which is The hundreds of millions of dollars that Harvard receives from anti-democratic, anti-Semitic, anti-Western countries should be rescinded. That the tenured faculty who call for intifadas, who bring in their political biases and narratives into the classroom, should be disciplined. That students who block the entrances of libraries and classrooms have no place in any institution of higher learning. And we are incredibly confident in our chances of success because the facts as pled are in fact the facts. And I always joke, when we win, I will sponsor a kiddush for all of the Jewish people. There'll be lots of herring, and I look forward to celebrating with everyone because this is not just a lawsuit against Harvard. It's not just a lawsuit with a plaintiff. This is a lawsuit on behalf of American Jewry.
One of the things that made me most hopeful since October 7th is seeing that tremendous unity and connection that the Jewish people have in standing up for each other. But one question we have to ask ourselves, is that unity only come when we're being attacked from the outside? Do we only become unified when anti-Semitism goes to record levels? Or can we actually be unified and be connected to who we are, even when that anti-Semitism is not there?
I have been privileged the last year to travel across the country, meet with Jewish students from an array of college campuses. The amount of Jewish students who have told me that they're not particularly observant, they are not particularly religious, they never certainly felt connected to Israel or the Jewish people beforehand, but they're gonna wear a kippah. They're going to go to Harvard Chabad or Harvard Hillel for Friday night services. They're going to say a chapter of Psalm in English for a hostage or for a soldier. They're going to wear their Star of David necklace. The amount of young American Jews who've woken up post-October 7th and have said, I'm not going back to sleep. I am part of this story. I am part of this people. And I am loud and proud and confident in those values. So that to me has been absolutely remarkable. And it's been one of the greatest accomplishments of American Jewry of the 21st century. That yes, it's unfortunate it took October 7th, but nonetheless, we have a golden opportunity to seize these young, passionate Jews who are newly invested in their Judaism.
I hate to say that there were any silver linings of the aftermath of October 7th, but if I had to point to one, it would certainly be the unity, strength, and resilience that I saw in our community, in our Jewish community at Columbia.
Our Chabad house went from maybe having, 70 people at Shabbat to 300 people at Shabbat.
The most powerful thing that you can do is get involved in a Jewish community, whether it's through Chabad or Hillel or otherwise on campus. Make it your home base because they will always be there for you. Whether it's through learning, through celebrating holidays, through advocacy, through birthright, whatever it may be, finding your Jewish community will give you the strength and support.
People often ask me, is the golden age of American Jewry over? And I give them a very simple answer, not without a damn fight. And that's what we're doing, that's what Aish is doing, that's what we will continue to do because we don't have any other option. We need educated, knowledgeable, wise Jewish people as young and as early as possible. So rather than donate to efforts that will punish students who draw swastikas, yes, they should be punished, but what's more important is young Jews receive a Jewish education.
Our Judaism is what has kept us going for thousands of years, not the anti-Semitism. And that Judaism of who we are, the beliefs, the morals, the values, the tenets that we have gotten from the last generations and that we must pass on to the next generation, that is what can unify us.
You have nothing to be embarrassed about. You have no one to apologize to because you are part of the most remarkable story ever told in history, and that is the story of the Jewish people. And what a privilege it is to be counted and be included as a main character in that story.
We will see a very bright future ahead of us. Eventually. Bright futures don't come, without a little thunder before them. Right? And that's what we're seeing right now.
If we would be just as committed to making sure that Judaism is passed down to the next generation as we are in fighting anti-Semitism, then we can be proud and unified even without anti-Semitism in the world. And that, I think, has to be a lesson that we take away from this.
For Jewish students, I think we have a lot to look forward to because now we are more united than ever.
It has never been a better time to publicly say, I'm Jewish and these are my values. Wear that kippah, wear that Star of David necklace, go to that Shabbat dinner.
Be proud, because maybe that pride will inspire pride in the next person. And maybe it'll have a ripple effect.
All I ask is be proud that you are Jewish. Am Yisrael.